everyone, and thanks for joining us. I recognize a lot of names on the attendee list, so appreciate you participating in this. Brian and I are excited to talk about succession planning today. I am Chad Flanagan. I'm the partner in charge of business valuation at Eide Bailly. My background, much like Brian's, is we get a lot of phone calls to perform business valuations for clients looking to exit their business, and as we work with them, we get an understanding of the larger need, which is really overall exit planning assistance. And so we get a chance to work with family and closely held businesses to structure new ownership, help them identify leadership and management teams. And we've also gotten a chance to work with clients in the sale of their companies to third parties, as well as assistance with ESOP formations. And so we have some unique perspective from evaluation and CPA side, and we'll talk about how it really takes a team, and there's a lot of considerations to work through. Pleased to be joined by Brian Christensen today. Brian?
Thanks, Chad. Yeah, I've worked with Chad, obviously, in the valuation team, and as he's already kind of alluded to, we could ask to perform valuations for a variety of purposes, and quite often, if they don't start with a succession plan in mind, they generally tend to move in that direction. And so, having seen quite a bit, we're going to come with a little bit of unique perspective and touch on some facts of that.
So what we want to cover today, we're excited to talk about succession planning in general. It's such an important topic, sometimes hard to talk about. We're dealing with business owners facing their own mortality. That's one of those things that's easy to put off, but it's really important. And so it's our job as trusted business advisors to make sure we're having those difficult conversations with business owners. And in any good succession plan, what we're talking about is first of all, making sure that the owner can successfully transition their business, and then also ensure the near and long-term success of the business. Create a win-win for the buyer and the seller. When working through these engagements, it's very important for us to identify the needs of both. And starting with the seller, I think for a long time, I would always start a process in the context of the seller wants to get as much money as they can from their business and monetize what they've built. And what I've come to find as I work with more and more clients is that often that's not the case, that it's more about the legacy they put together, the community, creating opportunity for others in the company. Many of them are very charitable. So there are a lot of factors that play into that, and very important that in any succession plan, those are identified. On the buyer side, equally important, if this is going to continue to be successful, the business is going to carry on, that next generation needs to be ready. And we often find that next group of leadership is very good at operating the business. They've been in it for a long time. What they're not as familiar with is some of the governance, the financials, the legal considerations. So just maybe some preparation around what it's like to own a business. And sometimes it is a sale to a third party, and it's a little bit more of a clean handoff. But even then, buyers really want to know that there's a strong management team in place. So our outline for today, I'm just going to kind of go through first and talk about our owners ready. We have some survey data to cover there. Brian's going to come on and talk about important steps in the process. I'll come back to talk about the various different exit strategies, different ways to exit and how to approach that. And then Brian's going to cover some tax considerations as we consider those different options. So are owners ready to exit their business? We kind of using a survey that we found from the Exit Planning Institute. They publish a very interesting report in the state of owner readiness. This particular one's from the Twin Cities area, but we find it's pretty representative of all the markets that we operate in. This one tells us maybe what we all already know. We have an aging ownership group. The census says that 63% of privately held businesses are owned by baby boomers. The survey tells us 68%, so they're kind of in line. And 80% of owners are 50 years of age or older. So we have an aging demographic, and exit planning is, of course, already very important, but as age increases, it becomes more and more important. And these are companies, we often kind of get a sense from clients that, this is something that a large business needs to consider, but in this survey, 83% of the businesses were less than 25 million. I think it's even more important for small business to plan and prepare for an exit, in that a lot of times there's more key person dependence. That one person may be responsible for customer relationships, maybe some of the technical know-how, and maybe covers all facets of the business. And so, preparing the next group of leadership and management is going to be very important. And smaller companies are sometimes harder to sell, and so more planning again is helpful in those situations. This was kind of a slam dunk question. 99% of those responded that yes, transition strategy is important. And so it's not a matter of do people find this important? It's a matter of prioritizing it and making sure that a proper plan is put in place. Because as we kind of come to find out in the data, that we've got a lot of people retiring very soon. More than 53% are retiring in the next 5 years, 77% in the next 10 years. And we know that probably half those businesses have no planning at all. And the statistics say 80% of them have no written business transition plan. So again, the need is there. It's just a matter of making it a priority to get started. I think this slide is one of the most meaningful of the data, in that for many small businesses, we know that they maybe won't get a large paycheck. Maybe they go to market and sell to a third party, but it might be such that there are earnouts or holdbacks or seller financing. So the company is going to continue to need to be profitable through the transition period. This is also true of ESOPs, family transitions, management partner buyouts, those kind of things where you don't get that windfall all in day one. It's nice if you do, if you find that large strategic company that wants to write you a big check and take over the operations. But in most cases, there's a lot still riding on the future success of the company. So in this survey, 29% said it was critical, but many more said it is important. So we'll talk a little bit more about that today. A lot of these business owners have 80 to 90% of their net worth in the business. And so to monetize that and make sure that the transition goes smoothly is of ultimate importance to their net worth and their retirement plans. So with that, we have our first polling question. And the polling question is, exit planning is holistically looking at all the factors that impact the business owner and guiding the business owner through the process of exiting his or her business on their terms and conditions. True or false? We'll give you some time to answer.
All right, 100% true there.
We need harder questions, Amy.
I know.
So with 100% getting that question right, we could probably skip over a couple slides, but let's see what we have here. So, what is exit or succession planning really all about? Everybody's gotten the question right out of the gate, but really it is going to be looking at those factors and that impact the business owner. And we'll go through some of them in a little bit more detail in the next few slides. But in addition to kind of addressing those factors, it's also a process of guiding or helping the business owner go through those stages. So there's planning up front, but then exit planning is also part of the guiding and walking those steps and stages through that exit. So one of the biggest factors that we're going to see in a successful exit plan is time. The more time that a business owner has before they want to exit the business, the more options they have available to help achieve those goals. And generally, the happier they're going to be with the process overall. When you started the business, there were so many decisions to be made, so many considerations, and one of them probably should have been, how am I going to exit this business? And if you'd started that process by thinking about how you were going to exit before you thought about how you were going to get into business, that probably would have been a good strategy. But exit planning isn't something that we really address every single year. But it is something that's going to evolve over time. So if you put in the groundwork now and lay down a foundation or a framework for this process, as you continue over the course of several years, you'll be in a decent position as situations change for you to update your plan and take advantage of opportunities as they arise. So let's pause for just a second, because I just said time was the biggest factor in success. And if you haven't done any planning, please stick with us, because if you haven't done planning up until this point, now is a great time to start. Just because planning works best with some lead time doesn't mean that planning in a truncated time period won't be effective. It often just means that you have fewer options available to you, but there will be things that can be done to help get you to your goals. So along those lines, let's talk about what some of the components are of an exit or succession plan. So here we've identified a handful, looks like 3, 6, 7 different components. These are some example components. As you think about your own plan, some of these will likely not apply, and there will likely be some other components that you'll want to discuss in your plan. But we'll go through and pick a few to discuss. So we're going to start with the one at the top, identifying the owner's exit objectives and goals. So in this step, really the job is to understand and appreciate what you want to accomplish in leaving your business. And oftentimes that's going to go far beyond these 3 basic goals. But these 3 basic goals are, when do you want to leave? Or how much longer do you want to stick around and work? And how much money will you need to match the lifestyle that you want? And then who would you ideally like to transfer the business to? So with that in mind, these are some of the basic objectives, but they're going to go far beyond this. We're going to talk about some value-based objectives too that often play a role in understanding which of the exit strategies you're going to take. These goals are often, let's just jump right into the family harmony and start working our way through them. Family harmony, that's going to mean a little something different to each family. If you have children who are active in the business or children who are not active in the business, is family harmony going to be achieved through transferring this equally to those children, transferring to one and not to others? Or in certain families, family harmony is best achieved through selling outright to a third party or key management and not having the ownership transfer to the next family generation. Other value drivers might include the legacy that you've built in this company. A lot of business owners are proud of the companies they've built, and rightfully so. Most companies don't get to a point where they get to talk about transition or exit. Most will fail early on. And it's the survivors that get the opportunity to talk about planning and exit and succession. And so when you've reached that point, are you going to be concerned about this legacy? If the business shares the family name, is that going to be important to you if that name changes over time? And when you think about who you ideally would like to have as a buyer for this company, are you thinking about the legacy and that identity that you've built over time? Or is that something that's not so critical to you and you're interested in moving on and doing something different with the next chapter of your life? Also in here we have clients who think a lot about culture. From a value perspective, culture really is the personality of your company. It's the way that you, your coworkers, your customers, the public, everybody who interacts with the company kind of picks up on and gets to appreciate corporate culture. And sometimes corporate culture is contagious. Employees like to go work for companies where they feel valued and where they feel that they're part of something, they're part of a culture. So when thinking about your exit strategy and who your likely target audience is, does it include buyers who share your same values, your same corporate values? Are they buyers who are likely to maintain that corporate culture that you've fostered and created? Or is there a probability or a chance that culture will change? And if so, is it changing in a direction that feels good when you think about that exit strategy? And we're also going to talk for a second about community. It kind of ties in with that as well. Depending upon the nature of your business and where you operate, maybe you're a cornerstone of your community. And your employees are not just employees, but they're also neighbors and people who you see in your community. So you understand the importance that your company has played in your town or in your local community. And is that something that you'd like to, how would you like to see that continue and move on past your ownership? Is that something that when you consider who the buyer would be, will they maintain that? Will there be a probability that they would relocate? And would they take those jobs with them? Or will they have the same commitment to the community that you've instilled in your company and your team and keep it all right there? So when you think about these things, you know, they're not part of the core three that we talked about. The core three being when you want to leave, how much money do you need for your lifestyle, and who do you want to transfer your business to? But they certainly come back and revisit those three. And so when you think about who you want to transfer your business to, it's natural to start thinking about those value-based goals that you might have and reassess that target. Does that still sort of fit your overall plan? To help you work through a process of appreciating what and uncovering what some of your value-based goals might be, there's a couple of questions that you can ask yourself. And those are simply, what is my vision for my company without me? After I've left the company and put it into somebody else's hands to carry it forward, what would I like to see the company do? The other question to ask yourself is, what is my vision for myself without my company? And by that, I mean, is my identity uniquely tied to my company, or is it uniquely separate from my company? But for each of you, you can answer that question individually. What would you see for yourself once you've left the company? What would you like to do with the next couple chapters of your life? And as you think and reflect on these questions, it'll help you bring these goals to the forefront. And they're going to set some of the direction that you're going to want to go through the rest of your planning when you go back and revisit those three core components of how much longer do I want to work, how much money do I need to take with me, and who do I ultimately want to entrust with the business that I've built over time. So now once we've kind of set out some of these basic goals, some of which are numeric and some of which are just value drivers or value-based propositions, the next step in the process is really going to be to quantify the business and personal resources that you have available to you. As you think about that second key goal of how much money do I need to match the lifestyle I want, we're going to look at the resources compared to what we think that lifestyle looks like. So in understanding the value of your business and personal financial resources, we're going to look at them individually. Yeah, I think Chad mentioned that 80 or 90% of business value, or that net worth for business owners, is going to be tied up in the business that they're operating. And so understanding the value of that business is going to be critical when understanding what resources you're going to have to move forward into the next phase, into your next chapter or next phase. We're also going to take a hard look at what you've acquired in terms of non-business assets. So retirement funds, real estate assets, other investments that you might have, to really appreciate the full picture of resources you're going to have relative to that lifestyle that we discussed that you're looking to go fill. And really what we're talking about here is trying to identify whether the company that you've built is in a position, if you were to exit today, would you be left with enough resources to go and achieve the goals that you set out to achieve? And so this is effectively a gap analysis. We're going to be looking at what you have in terms of resources and also discussing with you what you need in terms of asset base to get you through all those goals. This gap analysis is going to create a couple of opportunities for some talking points and some change in activity or revisiting how the plan is going to function. So, for example, in going through this process, it's going to identify a couple of critical things for you. It's going to establish a starting point and an end point. If you do have a gap, you're going to have an understanding of the resources you have available and understanding the resources that you think you need to achieve those goals. And if those two numbers don't align, you've got a gap that you've got to navigate. The second thing it's going to do is it will hopefully provide you the motivation to close that gap. You can't really set down a path to get to the end if you don't really know where the end is. So identifying what the resources are that you're looking for to achieve those after ownership goals, it's going to set that target point, and thinking about the resource. And then we're going to turn the question back to business value and non-business assets, and identify where you have the opportunity to close that gap. So for most of you, we would look at your bigger asset base, recognizing that smaller change in a bigger asset base will help you close the gap a little faster. And for most business owners, that's going to be inside the value of their business. And we'll touch on some business valuation topics coming up in a little bit. But the gap analysis, just to kind of finish this point, it's based on a variety of inputs, some of which are known and some of which are not. When we think about retirement funds and income producing real estate, stocks and bonds, you probably have a pretty good handle on what the value of those items are. When it comes to understanding the resources you're going to need or the value of your business, you might not have quite as good a handle on those two components of this gap analysis. And really the gap analysis is only going to be as good as the inputs that we have when assessing how we're going to get from A to B, or assessing if there is a gap to begin with. And so some of the points, some of the common misconceptions or areas where there's conflict or potential pitfalls with this gap analysis are going to be understanding the amount of income that you'll need post-exit. Have you adequately figured out, is your estimate of income going to be too high, or is your estimate of income a little bit too low? And when you think about how you're going to choose to spend your money, if you are retiring as opposed to stepping into a secondary business or a serial entrepreneur role, if you are looking at retirement, will you be spending money initially on travel and lifestyle, and then in later years on medical and care? And if so, how do those values fluctuate over time? And so being able to kind of predict what that cash flow, what that nest egg needs to look like to span that period of time can be a little daunting. But we can certainly work with you on those types of things and identify resources through financial planners and other groups to help give you good estimates on those. Other areas of gap analysis pitfalls would be understanding how far the money needs to go. Is it just over your lifetime? Is it your lifetime and a spouse, or are there other people who you're financially supporting that need to be considered in part of that overall funding plan? When you think about how much it takes to get from exiting the business to a point in time, and then also considering what rate of return will be earned on those assets post business ownership. Early in life, it's easy to think about investing aggressively because there's plenty of time. But as we get closer to a point where we need to actually spend those dollars, risk tolerance likely will and should likely change. The appetite for risk and the ability to rebound from volatility is reduced if you need to access funds relatively quickly. And so a portion of your portfolio would likely change, and it's a function then of making sure we have realistic rate of return estimates as we think about the growth of those assets to support your lifelong goals. And now we're going to turn to the left side of the screen and talk about the business valuation. Likely one of your bigger asset classes, understanding this value is going to be critical to really appreciating what resources you'll have after you exit or sell the business. What resources will you have available to achieve all those goals that we've worked closely on identifying? And not only understanding the value, but understanding what would be available to spend from that value. And those aren't necessarily the same thing. And I think that Chad I'll touch on it later on in taxation, and Chad may touch on it a little bit as well on exit methodology, but really thinking about what's available out of the net proceeds, taking into consideration all the transaction costs that would go into the process. So now that we just sort of talked about the business valuation and its relative importance into the gap analysis, let's talk about it from a slightly different perspective. When you're looking to exit the business and you have a target audience in mind, you have somebody who you would like to be the successor, or in this case, a buyer of that business. Your buyer is going to have an idea of the value. And if they don't, they're going to be working pretty hard to come up with an idea of the value so that they can understand their ownership proposition and why it makes sense to them. And I think it's critical that sellers should have that expectation too. They should understand the value of the business. You wouldn't sell a car without understanding what it was worth. You wouldn't take it to a dealer and try to trade it without understanding what it was worth. And you certainly wouldn't do it with your largest asset. And so really having a good appreciation for what the value of the company is going to be an important step in any kind of exit. We've already talked quite a bit about gap analysis. And so we're going to skip over the middle of the slide and talk a little bit about good news. So you have a gap. You're in good company. I think a lot of business owners are going to have gaps, especially depending upon what their lifestyle goals are post-retirement. And that's why time is a great success factor in exit planning. The more time you have in front of you, the more you can do to change the value of your assets that will contribute to that lifestyle plan that you've laid out. So thinking a little bit about business value, it's not fixed. There is a value at any point in time, but that value certainly can change, either increase or decrease over time, depending upon numerous factors that you participate in every day. The decisions that you make, that business owners make every single day, are going to influence the path that company takes and ultimately participate in increasing the value or potentially decreasing that value. And so in this situation, business valuation can act as a bit of a roadmap and help business owners appreciate how to use this particular asset to close a gap in that analysis between what you have today and what you would need when you choose to exit. So I think at this point, we're going to take a break and address our second polling question. So the question is going to be, step one of exit planning is deciding your objectives and goals. Is that true or false?
98% true.
All right, thank you, Amy. So let's go back to business valuation for just a quick second. And with business valuation, if the goal is to grow the business because you do want to close that gap over time as you're moving towards an exit, I think it's important to take a moment and think about who's going to help you grow that business. Do you have key employees? Do you have some key management that is going to be working with you in growing that business? And if so, is it relevant to incentivize those people to grow, to help you hit those goals? You know, perhaps their employment is already geared towards growth and no additional incentive is necessary. But if you do need to accelerate and grow that business, getting everybody focused on the same growth and the same plan would certainly be helpful. And the business valuation can help set some targets for that. If any part of your exit strategy involves employee ownership, whether that be key management taking a portion of ownership and then the rest going somewhere else, or outright sale to 100% of the company to the employees, business valuation can play a really important role in getting that type of a transaction done. No doubt your employees already understand their job, what the company does, the in and outs of operations day in and day out. They may not have been invited to see financials at this point, and they may not, and if they do know about the financials, they may not have a strong appreciation for how the numbers they see in a financial statement really translate into the value, into the offer that you've presented to them. And so this helps really build, this is an opportunity to really build confidence and to let those employees know that, to help educate them into appreciating why the value is what it is and why that the offer that maybe you've presented is a fair and reasonable offer for the business. And then if any part of your planning involves a situation where discounts may be applicable, then a business valuation would certainly be relevant in supporting and defending those valuations. And again, that's only in situations where a portion of your planning may have situations where valuation discounts would be applicable. So let's look at a few of the value drivers that we see in business if you are looking to make some changes and close some gaps in your planning as you move forward to exit, or even if you're just looking to have a wide audience of potential buyers when it is time to exit. These value drivers will play an important role. And each business is unique, and so there may be other drivers that are important to you. We're going to highlight just a handful today that are a little bit more generic, but some of them will certainly be not only company specific, industry specific, but there'll be things that you want to flesh out as you think about exiting, creating an audience for your company, creating a pool of activity around it, who would be a likely buyer. So let's start with the management team. First, do you have a management team? And if so, is it the right team that's in place? How hard is it for you to attract and retain key employees in key roles? When you think about separating from the business, think right now, could I take a 2-week vacation without my cell phone or my laptop, come back, and would everything be okay? And if the answer is no, then then it's probably a good time to start revisiting and thinking a little bit about what needs to be done to empower and train that management team, or what needs to be done to go out and find the right people to help partner with you as you get ready to transition a business. Another value driver to consider is going to be business systems. When you think about, have you created and can you document some standard practices and systems that demonstrate to a buyer that the business operates purposefully and professionally? This can create a strong level of confidence that the buyer will be able to maintain and grow this business after you've left. And I think what we're talking about between item 1 and item 2, management team and systems, is really going to be, can the business survive without its key ownership team currently? Is there sufficient depth in place to carry it forward? Are there sufficient systems in place to confidently go back out and recreate operational value year in and year out? And then let's talk about customers for a quick second. A lot of times we hear business owners talk about their customer base and the customer relationships that they have, and thinking about the number of customers and customer concentrations that they have. Do you have a single or a few customers that account for a significant portion of your revenue? If that's the case, that certainly may be okay, depending upon how those relationships are spread around through key employees. But generally speaking, a diversified customer base would help insulate the company from the loss of any single customer. And so thinking a little bit about your existing revenue streams and your customer base, it creates opportunities to think about how you might want to change that mix if you're looking to enhance or change the value. Other value drivers, this one might be a little bit more industry specific, but facilities and equipment. How do you maintain your facilities? Is everything clean and organized? Does it give a good impression when customers arrive? Little details like that speak more towards operational efficiencies and overall management depth and pride and facility appearance does make a difference. In terms of equipment, is your equipment current? Is it up to date? If you're in a space with a lot of technology, have you made the investments necessary to stay current and to stay on the front edge of that technology curve? Those types of things would give buyers confidence as they assess and look at the capabilities of your company relative to other things that they might be looking to invest in. Growth strategies. Really, do you have a business plan? Do you have a history of forecasting or creating a plan for near-term growth? And if you do have a history of laying out a plan for short-term growth, have you successfully hit those targets? Those are things that also add confidence to a deal. If a buyer can come in and assess and see that you have a plan and that you have a history of putting together reasonable and appropriate and achievable plans, they'll have more confidence in the plan that you're illustrating to them and in the growth that you're trying to communicate to them. And the way that and so when you're trying to create excitement about the opportunity for the company to do more into the future, if you have a history of successfully doing that, I think it creates a lot of confidence in that. Financial controls, this is really about, can I trust the financial statements as a buyer? And buyers are going to be looking at the financial data as they try to assess and put together an offer, or even decide if they're willing to look closely at your company and decide if they want to make a buy or if they want to do something different. And so having financial statements that they can trust in and use as the basis for determining the value creates a lot of confidence. And so if your financials are not in a condition where you can reasonably drill down and understand your customer relationships and where your money comes from and where it goes, and express that in a way that creates confidence to a prospective buyer, that's one of the things that a business owner should probably work on improving. Cash flow. Who doesn't like cash flow? Financial buyers are really going to be looking at, can I generate a rate of return by investing in your company? Similar to what it's done for you and your stakeholders through your period of ownership, a new buyer is going to be looking at it sort of the same way. Are they buying themselves a job, or are they buying themselves something that they're hoping will create a rate of return and grow and be something that they can then eventually turn and sell and capitalize the value of the energies and time that they put into that business? So cash flow is really impacted by a lot of these other things that we've touched on. Ultimately, a lot of these value drivers really manifest themselves, or they're seen through enhanced cash flow. And so doing some of these little steps would really help enhance some of the value. I think at this point, we're going to go ahead and transition to Chad to talk about what different strategies might be available or different paths for an exit.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Really, there's three opportunities to transfer your business. There's a sale to an outside party, there's a sale to inside employees or family, and then there's a gift/sale to family. So we're going to just talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each of those, starting with a sale to an outside party. So the sale to an outside party, this is really the scenario where if you want top dollar, this is the way to go. It might be a strategic buyer, might be somebody who can write that check. I mentioned that earlier. There's a lot of advantages that you get paid quickly and have a quick transition. The downside of it can be you can lose control of your corporate culture that Brian was talking about. They may change the name, they may change the location, leaving your community in a tough spot. So pros and cons with that. One thing I will say is a lot of people focus on price. We need to make sure that you're also looking at terms. A lot of times, terms can be as important, if not more important than price. When you get paid, is it a stock or asset sale? Brian's going to touch on that. Is it contingent consideration or earnouts? Are there reps and warranties? A lot of things to think about in an actual transaction. Make sure you have an attorney, appraiser, accountant involved in that. It can be complex. Different ways to do it. Obviously, the thing we want to avoid is orderly liquidation. Happens too often, but without the proper planning, sometimes that is the case. All you really get from that is sale of your tangible assets. More attractive would be sale to a third party. We're seeing a lot of recapitalizations, even some private equity groups that would buy in, even a minority interest, and give more cash flow to the company, help them grow, and then maybe flip that company in 5-7 years. Of course, if you're growing really fast or you have some really new and exciting technology, an IPO or going public might be an option. Sales to insiders, first of all, just that simple. I've identified 2 or 3 people in my company. Maybe I'll fund it with a note, because the key challenge to all these is oftentimes the buyer doesn't have money. So you're funding it with the future success of the business. And owners do this for a lot of reasons. I mentioned them earlier, but giving opportunity to people that have helped build the company. I'm continually impressed by the outlook that a lot of business owners have and the opportunity they want to share with those close to them. So that could be a family member. If you want to make it a little more formal, there's opportunities around ESOPs. ESOPs can be very attractive in that it creates a market to sell your shares. And so an owner can kind of control the amount of shares they're going to sell each year and do it at a more slow pace. Other advantages can be that these can be tax-free. There can be 100% S Corp ESOPs. The downside might be that, sometimes it's complex regulation. There's some administrative costs, corporate governance that you have to deal with. But for many, many companies, we are seeing an increase in the attractiveness of ESOPs. And then Brian talked a little bit about gifting or selling to family. The strategy around that usually is, how do we minimize taxes and really make sure we're looking at the whole family and implications to them. I'm going to kind of gloss over a couple slides here. One thing I really want to press on with this conversation is how important emotions are for this. I learned a long time ago that, as an accountant, I get pretty excited to look at the cash flows and the tax implications and structuring deals for business owners that really kind of check the box, and as Brian mentioned, kind of hit the lifestyle they want and close that valuation gap. But we have to make sure we understand kind of that social contract that the business has. What is their objective? Are they ready? What are they going to do with the next chapter in their life? I had a situation where a business owner did walk away from signing on the dotted line. And this was somebody that the buyer was somebody he had groomed, and where they were crushed that the seller decided not to sell to them. And it ended horribly. That the buyer started their own company, took some employees. There was some lawsuits around theft of IP and those kind of things. And it really couldn't help but think, what if in the beginning of our process, we talked to him about if he was ready or not? And the things he was thinking about is, I'm not going to see my customers, I'm not going to see my employees, I'm just not ready. So emotions are a huge part of this. Succession is never just about succession. There's a lot of other personal and family things to think about, and it's a very important part of this process. So the few slides here that just kind of summarize some of the things we talked about. Keep in mind that it is emotional, that business owners really need to try to put the interests of the business first to make sure it's going to be successful in the near and long term. It takes a commitment. You need to allow for time, and work with the team to develop a formal plan. There are reasons why people avoid this. Sometimes it's just they're so busy trying to grow their business. Other times it's just it brings up unpleasant conversations. If you have to choose your next successor, who's going to be leadership, management team, those kind of things, you're going to have to tell some people that they don't have an opportunity within that organization. We know that the longer we have to plan, the more successful a succession will be. And this is from the Family Business Institute again. You can see the statistics are very favorable to those that give themselves some time to plan. And kind of my last slide here is just some of the issues, specific to family business. A lot of small, mid-sized businesses are family businesses. They have some unique things to consider, talking about role of family members, compensation, those kind of things. One thing I'll just mention is that oftentimes there's disagreements on the day-to-day management of the company, and it might be because mom's looking to exit in 2 years, and son is trying to take over the world with the business and grow at an incredible pace, and mom doesn't want to risk her capital in the business. There's just a different perspective based on where you're at with the business. So it's very important to have strategic conversations and make a decision on your near and long-term growth, and that might dictate some of the day-to-day management and feed into less conflict. So a few unique considerations for a family business. So this is our third polling question. Succession in a closely held business is never just about succession. True or false?
97% true.
Thanks, Amy. I think Brian's gonna finish us up with some tax considerations.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Just a couple moments on tax considerations. Generally speaking, all else equal, buyers are going to be looking to try to purchase assets as opposed to purchasing stock if they can, because it is going to create a little bit of a tax incentive for them, and it does kind of minimize some of their risk in going into the company. Sellers are generally going to want the opposite. They're going to be looking to sell stock as opposed to assets in an attempt to maximize the take-home value, and also to kind of step away from some potential liabilities that might exist with that company, depending on the nature of what they do. And so when you think about that sort of split, we've got a hierarchy of different structures here of how companies tend to kind of move or transition. And up at the top, we'll see things that are generally more favorable to sellers, and down at the bottom, as you work your way down, it becomes generally more favorable to buyers, all else equal. And really, there's only a couple things I'd like to touch on in here. So at the very top, we've got a stock purchase, a true stock purchase with everything that sellers typically think of when they think about selling stock. And then if we go a couple items down to purchase a stock with a Section 338 election, this is something to be aware of when you get that unsolicited letter of intent that shows up. You didn't realize there was a buyer out there interested, and you've got a letter in front of you, and it says, we're going to buy the stock, and then a few paragraphs down, buried somewhere, it says we're going to have the Section 338 election. That's, yes, they will be buying the stock, but that's a tax election that basically allows them to have the transaction occur with a similar tax situation as if they did an asset sale. And so that may not be as advantageous as that letter reads if you just skim through it. But as you work your way down from top to bottom, that's some of it generally works from seller favorable down towards buyer favorable when you just think about the tax components of being able to depreciate assets and recognize income. And so I think we're going to go ahead and take our last polling question. Buyers usually prefer to buy assets rather than stock. Is that true or false?
So 81% true.
All right, thank you, Amy. And so with having hit the last polling question, I think we're going to go ahead and just wrap up here with some closing thoughts. So we've talked in quite detail about exit planning, and we've talked a little bit about that it's an iterative process, really. I mean, you put together a plan, and it's going to evolve over time, and that's part of why time is really an important factor to having success in exit planning, as Chad showed a couple slides about. And if you haven't started planning, now's a great time to start. It's not too late, but the longer you give yourself, the more runway you give yourself to plan, the greater your chances of success in a way that's meaningful to business owners is what the data kind of suggests. Something else to keep in mind is no two paths are going to be the same. So recognize that it is going to be unique to every business owner. and it should be contemplated as such. And once you've laid out a good plan and you have an idea of who you would like to be that buyer, or if it does or does not involve key employees or key family members, it's probably critical to share the plan once you have a plan well defined. Because one of the things that could occur is you've put a lot of energy and work into laying out your plan and thinking about who your successor is going to be. And if you don't communicate that somebody is a part of your plan, create their own plan. Is it with your company or is it something else? So once you've identified your plan, it's important to communicate it to your stakeholders. Yeah, and with that, I think we're going to open it up for some questions.
Any questions that you guys would like to ask? Go ahead and put that in the Q&A box, or you can put it through in the chat feature. All right, one question that did come through here is, how do I get started to develop an exit plan?
Yeah, this is Chad. I think that is an intimidating thing. Where do I start? I think forming the team is the first part. So if you have, obviously as CPAs, if you have a tax accountant that you trust that can help you get started, but it will probably involve, you know, an attorney and potentially an exit planning specialist, someone that would facilitate a process for you and have some of the tools and resources to bring in. So, you know, ask around, ask other closely held business owners if they've used anyone, but, you know, hopefully you find somebody that can quarterback a team and get the process started for you.
All right, we do have time for one more question here. What if my preferred buyer doesn't want the business?
This is Brian. I'll take that one. I think part of having a plan is it should also include having a backup plan. You know, you can put forth a plan with the best of intentions, and it's one of the things that I think Chad alluded to was a plan was in place and it just ended up not being the right plan at the 11th hour, and it created a great deal of havoc. I think having a backup plan in mind and recognizing that if you don't communicate your plan, that, you know, not everybody will be on board if they don't know which direction you're going. So having a backup plan and recognizing that you might need to shift gears and look at different options would be relevant. So having a plan that's broad enough to incorporate that kind of change is helpful.
Awesome. Well, thank you two so much for doing this webcast. Thank you all for attending. And here's just a list of our upcoming webinars. Actually, this looks a little outdated, but the link is still good. So you can visit our website to see any of our upcoming webcasts for iBailing for the rest of the year. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.